Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. You all do such vital work, and as you can tell from that video, we are real optimists about the future, but that success is all going to turn on your leadership, and that's what I want to talk about today. I grew up near Seattle, as was said, and my father was a labor union official. And as a little girl, I used to love sitting around the union hall and watching the men, and it was all men in his union, come in and get retrained when they were in between jobs. And at that time, if you all think back to your parents, union halls retrained people and employers retrain people. Companies like GE and GM, we expected to work for them our whole careers, and they retrained people as the work changed. And today, we face a world where people feel on their own. And that's really where you come in and where we come in, which is how do we enable people to find their place in this digital economy? I'd argue that automation is disrupting everyone's job even more than globalization, which is what's been talked about a lot lately. And if you look at your own work environments, you probably can relate to that. What I want to talk about today is how much work is changing, how much the paths for people to achieve success in the workforce is changing, and how we together need to create a new system that works for people. As you saw in the video, we're experiencing today the biggest shift in the labor market in 100 years. Since the time we moved from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy, we are now moving from this industrial economy of factories and retail stores and auto manufacturing into a digital economy at an even more rapid pace than the change happened before. And when that change happened 100 years ago, we invented institutions to enable people to succeed. We invented the high school. I mean, you probably haven't focused on why did we invent the high school and when did it happen. But it was really to enable people to make that shift from the agricultural economy to the move into cities and into factories. And what we see today is the anxiety among people of a transition, the tremendous anxiety about the change and our robots taking our jobs and what does work look like going forward and how do I succeed, and a lot of people opting out. But we're not seeing the building of the institutions that are needed to support people. People all over America are struggling with decades now of relatively flat wages. They're struggling with working 2 or more jobs to make what they used to make in one job. And we found that as we look at some of the research, that there's also very significant underemployment, people working in jobs that don't really fully capitalize on their talents. And I'm probably not telling you anything you're not well aware of. One number really worth focusing on, though, is a study done by the Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce that found that if your highest level of educational attainment is a high school diploma, that there are 7.3 million fewer jobs for you today than there were in 1989. Yet we know that 70% of Americans don't have a college diploma. So there is a real disconnect. We released a poll with Pew just before the election that showed just how discouraged people are by this. 65% of the respondents said that they think good jobs are hard to find where they live, and you know that people aren't particularly mobile. 63% said that there's less job security now than 20 to 30 years ago, and that was what I was talking about the long-term employment and retraining. And 60% believe that the children of today will be worse off than their parents financially. which is just an attack on the American dream that we cannot tolerate. We saw this played out in the presidential election, and there's been some reference to it already. Across the country, people expressed the feeling that they were being left behind, they're uncertain about their economic future, and they didn't see anybody doing anything about it to help them. I believe that a lot of the hostility to Washington is not about government itself, but it's about people feeling that those institutions, those structures, those capacities that we developed 100 years ago are just not being created for them now. But it's a very odd disconnect because, in fact, the jobs are there. A lot of you are employers, you understand this. At a time when millions feel underemployed or out of the workforce or are not able to find good career paths, there are about 5.6 million jobs across America going unfilled. It's holding back the growth of our companies, but it's also holding back the growth of our people. Almost half of employers report difficulty in filling jobs due to a lack of talent. We know there are great jobs out there in this digital economy, in healthcare, in IT, in every sector. You're going to hear from one of my great friends tomorrow about the retail sector. There are IT jobs in healthcare, in financial services, in many of your places of employment, most likely. And there are also great jobs in advanced manufacturing. Something isn't working for people, though, and people appreciate it. And as I said, that was really played out in this election. What they need are new skills, the skills to do these jobs. And you've talked about skills a lot before. We did a survey with Pew about people's attitude towards skills, and we put it out right before the election at a time when the country was very divided. We found, as you can see in the slide on the board, that people are not divided on this one really critical point. 87% of working Americans said that they believe it is essential or important for them to get new skills throughout the course of a lifetime in order to compete in today's jobs. The National Skills Coalition reports that middle skill jobs, which are, you know, those that require more than a high school diploma but not a four-year college degree, account today for 54% of American jobs, and those jobs are growing. There is tremendous opportunity for middle skill jobs. We address this issue in our book, America's Moment, and that book provides a bit of a roadmap forward for the digital economy. It makes a very straightforward argument. Yesterday's strategies don't work for today's economy. We need a skills-based labor market, a labor market that enables all Americans based on the skills they have or the skills they can attain to participate in the digital economy. We urgently need a system by which we are connecting Americans to jobs based on skills, where employers are looking for people to fill those jobs based not on the old degree system, which is not granular and specific in the way we now do everything else on the internet. You can go on the internet to buy a pair of shoes, and you can break it down by the heel height, the color, the size, the manufacturer, the comfort level. But if you want to look for a job, it's a BA and 4 years of experience. We can do better than that in this environment where we have the technology and the tools to become much more refined as employers about what we need and what skills people need to get, as educators or trainers about what we teach and what skills people have obtained by getting their 6 months at a community college, their 4 terms, their time put in at a college even though they haven't been able to get the 4-year diploma. And for job seekers to be able to say what it is that they know how to do and what experience they've had. So I'm going to now show you another video, which I hope will help you understand a little bit more this notion that everyone who has a smartphone ought to be able to have a smart career. America's really going through the largest change in its economy since the time of the Industrial Revolution. And so many Americans don't feel that they understand what their place is in this new economy.
There are 7.3 million fewer jobs in America today held by people with a high school diploma or less than there were in 1989. And in some ways, the single most important question for all of us in this country is, how do we move forward without leaving some people behind?
For decades, we've been telling people, get a college degree and you'll be able to compete for the growth jobs with higher incomes. Today, it's not necessary that that be the singular path that people take.
Skills aren't always measured by a diploma. They're measured by the experience that you gain and the type of training that you receive.
What I'm seeing and hearing is that there's a fear that jobs are going away and there's not enough opportunities out there. But we see that in the trade sector, there's been a huge increase in openings for employment, but there's not enough skilled labor to fill those roles.
In healthcare, people always assume there's only two people that work in the hospitals, and that's doctors and nurses. But you have a gamut of different occupations: cardiovascular technician, surge tech, IT, health information.
The real opportunity is to look to the middle of the graph, to the so-called middle-skilled jobs, and to equip more people to hold those kinds of middle-skilled jobs, and then to create more of those jobs.
So a skills-based labor market makes it possible for people to see career paths that they didn't realize were open to them before. We found people like a FedEx truck driver in her early 40s, and she doesn't know what the digital economy holds for her. And through online tools, she can see that she has a lot of the skills for a higher tech, higher paying job with very few additional hours of training.
We need to change hiring practices, which is part of what Skillful's doing. Working on the ground, meeting with businesses, showing them how to do more of a skills-focused hiring.
87% of Americans believe that skills training throughout one's lifetime is necessary in order to succeed.
We have a role. It's not just to sit back and hire people coming out of our college system or even our high schools. We need to do more training and apprenticeships.
People say, well, what if you train these people and they leave? And we say, well, what if you don't train them and they stay?
Employers have to do more. Those of us in the tech sector need to create tools that will help people do more. Educational institutions, governments, and frankly, most importantly, all of us have an individual responsibility to do more in terms of learning more.
So let me talk to you a little bit now about Skillful. We've started this in Colorado, and you see some Colorado workforce coaches in that video. Are there people here from Colorado? Great, well, I hope you're part of Skillful. What we're trying to do in partnership with the state of Colorado, the workforce centers, both the government workforce centers and Goodwill and United Way, and a lot of the local employers and educators, is to create a skills-based labor market that if we can get it to work in Colorado, we want to go to other states and work with you as well. There are a lot of elements of Skillful going on in different parts of the country. But what we're trying to do with Skillful is to integrate them so that the capacities that the state brings to workforce development, the capacities the workforce centers bring, the capacities of the employer affiliations, that these all lead to much more by being part of a system than they could ever possibly be as partnerships within sectors or segments of the economy in Colorado. So we're working with everyone in the community to try to overcome the barriers to success for the almost 70% of Coloradans and hopefully over time all Americans, to enable them to participate in the digital economy and really see themselves in these jobs. We are, as I said to you, both articulating what the skills are that are needed in jobs, and we work very deeply with 90 employers around the state and a core team of 20 employers to try to break down those job descriptions, to talk to what the real skills are, and to revise what the job postings on LinkedIn and other places look like. We worked with educators and trainers to try to better define and shine a spotlight on what people get from their training. We have been using data and technology centrally in this work to enable both greater efficiency, but really importantly, much more transparency. And that transparency is needed for everyone. You all know that most people do the work that their parents or their neighbors do because that's what they know. So even creating the transparency about what these new jobs look like for people is a tremendous step forward. And then the task of having them see that they themselves might be able to put on that white suit in an advanced manufacturing plant or go into an entry-level IT career, becoming a computer specialist when they don't code, so what does that mean? Creating the transparency for people of what the jobs look like and helping them see themselves in it is an essential initial step. And this is a place where we've found that the single most important element are the coaches in the workforce centers. And I really hope that you dwell on that and think about that in your own context. How much of your own work is devoted to understanding what the digital economy jobs are in your state and to helping people see themselves in those jobs, see what the skills are that are needed, and see that they can get those skills or have the capacity to do those jobs. We, in the video, showed you some areas of work where people might not think that they could make that transition. The FedEx truck driver who wouldn't appreciate that FedEx has actually trained her in basic IT skills that would enable her with 1 to 2 semesters of community college to get into a comparably paying entry-level IT job, but on a much more potentially successful new career path as she is, reaching the limit of how long she can still lift boxes. And the other element of that video that I'd ask you to reflect on when you think of your own communities was the health worker talking about the range of middle-skill jobs in healthcare. We really do tend to think in old industrial age models. What is healthcare? It's a nurse or a doctor. What is manufacturing? It's a big, heavy guy. Big muscular guy lifting heavy things or doing dirty work. All of this has changed, but we haven't yet enabled people to really learn about and focus on what the opportunities are. And I would think this would be the most essential aspect of your work going forward, to really try to understand what the digital economy jobs look like that are needed in your states and how to help people see themselves in them and get the training and skills that they need for those jobs. In Skillful, we found through the training forums we did, the best practice sharing, the professional development, that 85% of our Skillful coaches strongly believe that Skillful has provided them with new tools that enable them to get job seekers onto good career paths. So the hunger for this among the community of workforce center professionals is tremendous. But again, like creating that high school, we haven't really recreated the institutions to support our coaches so that they can support the job seekers and the institutions to create the training that's needed today rapidly and affordably. So we all in our communities need to be focused on this. Colorado's been an interesting proving ground for Skillful. It takes 15% longer on average to fill jobs in Colorado, and for the particular middle skill jobs we're focused on in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and IT, the length of time to fill even further exceeds the national average. Many job postings, particularly those in IT, actually ask candidates for a 4-year bachelor's degree, even though many of the workers in those positions today don't have one. For example, in the case of computer support administrators, 75% of the listings in Colorado required a college degree, but only 45% of current admins in those jobs have a college degree. And I could give you example after example of this being true with the so-called great inflation of requiring bachelor's degrees more and more for open jobs when the incumbents don't have them. And that's a really good place for you to start, to think about where you can break open the labor market for people in your communities. The work in Colorado is paying off. It's still a small sample size, but over the last 9 months, we have found that 48% of our job seekers that we surveyed have enrolled in training or obtained new jobs. And as I say, we give a lot of the credit for this to the coaches, because those who work with a skillful coach are much more likely to persist and much more likely to have this kind of success. We found in doing this work that government partners are essential, and those of you in this room appreciate that already. Government partners are able to scale things, to deploy resources like the WIOA resources, and to bring business to the table, and that's enormously important for this kind of work. We also found that the biggest impact we have is on small and medium-sized businesses. They are much less likely to have the capacity to do this on their own, and it's extremely important to focus on small and medium-sized businesses in your community, because they are the job creators. Most of the new jobs created in America are created by small and medium-sized businesses. Our early findings are that equipping coaches is critical, giving them professional development, giving them technology tools, Yelp-style filters to find good work, efficiencies is tremendously important. And I hope that as we look to expand Skillful to other states, we will be able to look to you to be the central leaders in your state in understanding how to make this transition. But I hope that in your own work, you view yourselves as the nexus between businesses, governments, and job seekers, and that you think about what that requires in this new digital economy and what you can do in your community to create the infrastructure that people need to succeed in digital economy jobs. You really can be the core leaders and drivers of a skills-based labor market that gives everyone the opportunity to succeed, that enables people in your community to feel they have a meaningful place in the new economy, so that their option is not opiates or retreat and departure from the workforce because of lack of rewards. You really can. We need America's great workforce to compete, but also to maintain the values and cultures and strength of our communities. And you have a central role in enabling people to find themselves in this new economy. There are some very specific things I can encourage you to do. First of all, get out front and be the ones who set the agenda. When you walk around Capitol Hill tomorrow or write those letters that you're writing, keep this in mind. You have a central place in enabling people to see themselves in the digital economy and to get the training and connections that they need to get into those jobs. Leverage data to do that. It's a whole new world, and there's a lot of ways to make your case now you couldn't before. I encourage you to really focus on middle-skill job seekers and to connect with them. Focus on professional development for coaches. It's often, we often forget our own while we're focusing on the job seekers, but that professional development is really critical for the people in the workforce centers to really learn about the new jobs and how people can get to them and to have the tools and access they need. And finally, I would encourage you to think about deploying business practices into the way you do this so that as job seekers work with you, they're getting the skills themselves that they will need in the workforce through the work they do with you. So as they fill out their profiles, or as they are looking for jobs, that you're encouraging the workforce centers to help them use technology tools, the very kind of thing that they will need to deploy in a work environment in the digital economy. We have a great opportunity to make a tremendous difference, and you are on the front lines, so you are the most critical element of creating a work environment and a workforce that is going to power this country as we move ahead. It doesn't do any good to talk about bringing back jobs or to talk about building infrastructure if we don't have the workforce that is capable to do those jobs in the way they need to be done today. And that is a critical element of any success. So town by town or city by city, you can create that workforce within your own community. You can compete with each other, but you can support each other and share best practices and share opportunities and enable the people in your community to see what the digital economy looks like, to see themselves in it, employers to find the talent they need, educators and trainers to begin to make the shift that they need in order to train this workforce in this current economy. So I urge you to keep going, keep pushing, keep doing what you're doing, keep challenging yourself to understand what's new and to be there to meet it. And I look forward to working with you myself as we take on these grand challenges for the next economy in America. Thank you very much for having me and for everything you do. And I wanted to save some of my time to hear from you. So I hope we've got some mics in the audience. I don't know if this is typical or a departure, but it's important to me. So I hope that now you'll stand up and although we have to keep it brief, I'd love some comments on what's going on in your community or questions for me or for each other.
Hello, I'm John Muller from New York, and my one question is that we got 4 or 5% unemployment, and it's very difficult to come up with people to fill these jobs, much less the ones that have skills. So where's the answer to finding people without some significant barriers that prevent them to getting into this job?
So the unemployment number, I think, is completely deceptive. There are a lot of people who've opted out. There are many, many people who are underemployed, as I said, and people have opted out because they're discouraged often. We've had flat wages for decades. So the people are there. I don't know what kind of business you're in and whether it's a matter of finding the people who like to do that kind of work. But for the opportunity for Americans to have rising incomes, to have a better future, to feel part of this economy and not discouraged and anxious, the opportunities are there, and I tried to give you some of the details about that. I'm sorry.
Good morning. My name is Joe Bevilacqua. We're from the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce and the Merrimack Valley Workforce Investment Board in Lawrence, Mass. Would you also, thank you for your presentation. Would you also talk a little bit more about the mature worker, the person that may be moving on from a career and that needs to be advanced in terms of digital knowledge and how they move forward? You know, we're seeing a lot of that in our area, obviously. Thank you.
Sure, and I'm sorry, with the lights, it's hard to know where the speaker is, so when you stand up and speak, wave your hand if you would. You're in the back, okay. One of the things that was interesting about Skillful, when we started out, it started out as a technology platform, a website and connections to LinkedIn and connections to the state workforce efforts. And we went out and recruited people in job fairs and train stations and things like that to bring them to Skillful, as well as the workforce centers. We really expected the people who would respond to a technology front end like that, if you will, would be people in their 20s and 30s. And in fact, we found that it's just the kind of people you're talking about, second career, third career, fifth career, whatever it is, people in their 40s, 50s, even 60s and early 70s who were using the Skillful platform. And we did some focus groups of people of all ages, and we asked people how often they searched for jobs online, and everyone in the focus group said they searched every day online for a new job. So I think that this kind of capacity that we're talking about building for people is essential for people throughout their life.
So you said that wages are flat, but we also know that the stock market is at an all-time high and companies are more profitable than ever. And I think one of the recent searches that I did showed that there were more people, even with the low unemployment rate, looking for jobs than there are jobs available in America. And is part of the discussion need to be, what's the alternative? In the Europe countries, there's natural unemployment rates that much higher than what we've traditionally had in the United States. And is that something that we need to be prepared for to accept as well for our economy? Or as we move into the digital era, are there really going to be enough jobs for all the people who want them that are going to be at the pay level they need to sustain themselves?
Thank you. It's interesting to me. I don't know if this will persist in all the questions, and I look forward to talking to people outside afterwards too. But there has been so much press and media attention focused on whether robots are taking our jobs, automation, taking away jobs, a decline in opportunity, that I'm hearing it in this room with the people who need to be focused on the capacity to create opportunity. So please don't take this as a criticism of your question. I very much appreciate it, but I really encourage you to go back and look in your own communities at the jobs that are going unfilled, the jobs that are taking too long to fill. In healthcare, it takes like 30% longer than in other sectors to fill middle-skilled jobs. If you go back, and we'll try to share more of that information with you too, but there are 5.5 million jobs in this country that can't be filled. Employer after employer, I think I quoted 50% of employers said that they have a hard time finding the workforce they need. So there's a big disconnect, and we need to focus much more on what's causing that disconnect. And in many, many cases, in the growth industries of IT and advanced manufacturing and the transformations in retail that you'll hear about from Mindy, and the growth in healthcare, in those industries, a lot of the jobs are middle-skill jobs that don't require a four-year degree. In fact, automation's attacking, radiologists who are MDs at the same time that it's attacking less skilled jobs. But the new jobs that are being created and the jobs that are going unfilled are tremendous. And so I'd really encourage you in your own communities to at least search for that data before you give up. Because I believe you're going to find that you have employers in your communities. If there's an employer here who wants to talk to this, who can't find jobs in his or her own environment, please speak up. I think that you will find that the opportunities are there, and that we really need to figure out how to connect the people who want growing income and want to put in the work. Remember, I said that 87% of Americans said they need to get training throughout their lifetime to compete for the jobs of the future. Well, 72% of those said it was their own personal responsibility, 72% of Americans, and 45% said that they had taken a course in the last year, a course or a training program in the last year. So I believe people are prepared to do what it takes if we can make it accessible to them and have them see how their investment in training or education will connect to the jobs that are available in the community. We have time for a couple more questions or comments.
Yes, as an employer, when I get resumes, for example, in the financial services arena that I work in, and these resumes of some of these young people, it's amazing. I mean, they've had 10 jobs in the last 2 years, and each one of those jobs was 2 or 3 months, and they're just going from job to job, low-skill job. And one of the things last year when I was here, there was a program in Florida, I believe it was the Florida Workforce Board, that was using the hotel industry as a training ground for a lot of people that, for example, spoke a lot of different languages, a lot of people that were new to this country, and using those as a place to train them for other advancing skills. Do you see a lot of industries, I mean, do you see that? I don't know if you've heard about that, but as a model for some industries that can use low-skill workers, but at the same time advance them enough to where they can, like the delivery lady example that you were using, to be able to move up so that whenever they come into a job or they're applying for a job that's higher skilled, that they were able to recognize those, like you were talking about, those skills that they might have. Because if you just give them to me at a higher level, I can train them in what I want them to do. And so I guess from industry to industry, as an example, some industries can use those low-skilled workers, but they also, I think, what I loved about that last year is they saw it as an obligation to train those people to get them up to maybe in a few years to go into their own restaurant business or their own running their own hotel or other skilled jobs that they might have.
Right. No, it's a really great example, and there are companies that are increasing retraining. For example, AT&T, when it realized that the technology was changing so tremendously, it concluded that it really needed to do a dramatic retraining of its workforce and is working with Udacity and others to do that, and that its option was either to lay off a lot of people and hire the people with the skills or to retrain its own workforce. And there are many other examples of companies that are trying to do that, but there's much too little awareness of how much companies can contribute to this. I was with a group of CEOs the other day, and after I finished talking, one of them looked at me and he said, I have just laid off 5,000 people to make room to hire 6,000 people who have the right skills, and I have just done the wrong thing, haven't I? So that's why I really say to you, go back to your communities. You understand your local workforce, the needs of the businesses. Help them understand that if we work as an integrated system, we can actually take the people who are willing to retrain, work with the educators in the community to get people the right training. One of the things that grew out of our work early on was the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, which you might have heard about, where Starbucks has funded its baristas and other partners to get an online college diploma while they're working at Starbucks. So there are examples of companies that are prepared to support people's retraining. But I think you're right to say that within a community, can we as a community get people the basic skills they need? It's sometimes called the soft skills. Get people to be able to identify the skills they've had working as a bank teller that might be transferable to a growth business in the community, and create a system within our own community that enables us to train people together and enable them to create good careers. I'm going to take one more quick question, but we're about out of time, so if you can make it short.
I wanted to say that I appreciate your presentation, and I understand about the digital economy, but I'd like to also point out that the service economy is one that's growing tremendously. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says that by 2020, we will need 1 million more direct support professionals supporting people who have disabilities and people who are elderly by 2020. And I understand that a lot of people see that as being entry-level dead end, but I'll tell you, when it's your parent or when it's your child that's receiving services, you don't want it to be that kind of job. And so I just think we have to advocate for more certification, a training ladder, and higher pay for those people so that it's a more respected profession, because by 2020, direct support professionals, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, will be the largest category of workers in America.
I totally agree with you, and I'm going to have to close on this because we're about out of time, but I just want to make one comment about that, which is that even those jobs will be digital economy jobs, and the best way to advocate for people having higher pay is to demonstrate that the home care they're providing they're able to take not just the blood pressure measurements, but over time they will be able to have an even bigger role in the healthcare system. And if people are trained and they're using the tools that we can put at their disposal, they will be a critical part of the healthcare system. And I appreciate that. Thank you for the comment. Thank you very much.
Now, please welcome to the stage, Josh Kopis.
I not only want to thank Zoe for her compelling remarks, but I really want to thank her for her words of encouragement, for her putting her belief in the power of this workforce network. To hear that she believes in us and our ability to support workers and businesses in this digital economy and in the future was a very powerful message, and personally made me very excited and empowered for the conversations that we're going to have over the next couple of days. I also want to remind everyone that you need to pick up a copy of America's Moment. Zoe will be outside on the concourse level signing books. As you can see with her willingness to take Q&A, she is here to ask questions. She's here to learn about what the challenges are you're facing and how she can support us in those causes. This morning, we've heard Zoe, Ron, and Tom explore some of the complex challenges of our time, the impact of technology on learning and work, the importance of cultivating local leadership capacity, of building better coaches, and ensuring equal access to new tools and work opportunities that will be made available in the 21st century economy. These issues and more will be examined in greater depth during our Exploring Issues sessions that begin in about 30 minutes. Immediately following these sessions, please be back here promptly at 12:15 for our luncheon program featuring brain breaks. So what just exactly are brain breaks? Brain breaks are a brand new feature of the forum that will help you and your teams confront persistent challenges in new ways. We'll leave further explanation to our guest luncheon host and innovation MC, Tamara Christensen. Her passionate, high-energy, inspiring thinking is being called an all-too-rare experience. That's a departure from business as usual. Please join our exhibitors, our sponsors, and other supporters in the exhibit hall for dessert, and make sure you are back here in the ballroom promptly at 12:15 p.m. Have a great morning, and I'll see you around.